Okay, Jonny, chapter 3, the right way to score a sales call and how it changes everything. So in this chapter, you say that how you score calls is the first step to fixing most sales problems. What does getting clear on a scoring rubric change so much for a sales leader?
It changes a lot because when you have a clear and a defined scoring rubric and you know how am I scoring the conversations across my department and my team, what it does is it removes the subjectivity from coaching. And so we talked about earlier the data of 94% of sales leaders coaching, but 20% or even less, depending on the study, will say that the coaching they get isn't relevant. It's because most of the time in a sales coaching environment, it's built off opinions, subjective ideas. Hey, maybe you should try this, or hey, next time try that, instead of saying, here's what happened and here's where we scored. And that is a level of clarity that most people just don't have. And so I think you remove the fuzziness and the confusion when you commit to scoring a certain way, and that's a major, major lift.
So at face value, the red, yellow, green scoring model that you introduce in this chapter, it's actually quite simple. You know, you skip a step, you get red, you score 0% on that step. You partially address a step, it's yellow, you get 50% credit. And then if you hit it 100%, you cover that step effectively in the call, that's 100%, right? But once a leader gets into it, I imagine they will very quickly realize there's actually some nuance here. It's not that the system is complicated, but it's really critical that you are very clear, especially between a yellow and a green score and what the difference is between a yellow and a green. At what point do we say that's 100%? And at what point do we go, no, it's not quite it. You don't get full credit there. That's not hitting the bar we want you to hit. And so let's walk through all 6 steps of the bridge. And I'd like for you to give me an example of the difference between a yellow and a green score at each step to help our listeners really think through this in their context. So let's start with step 1, pinpoint the pain. What is an example of what a yellow score may sound like on a call versus a true green, you hit it 100%?
Yeah, well, and let's look at it from, I think a way to think through the scoring is as the leader, you are determining, pretend it's like basketball, you're determining what's your 3-point line and what's your 2-point line. And in the sport of basketball, it's so simple, but where your toe is on the line dictates how many points you get. And so what your job and the way you should be thinking about in setting up your bridge score and your bridge selling framework is what are the lines you're gonna draw and how are you gonna coach to them? And the lines really are what's the standard your team is going to hit? And so when we talk about these yellows versus green, the yellow is usually like fine and it's pretty good and it feels good, but the green is the standard, the gold standard. And so with pinpointing the pain, a yellow could be your rep asks a handful of discovery questions and the buyer is telling you pain points. But a green is that seller pauses to repeat back the pain points and confirm it with the buyer. And even say something like, here's an example of an actual line for scoring. Are your sellers repeating back pain points and saying a sentence, something like, hey, here's what I'm hearing from you, XYZ, repeat some pain points. What else did I miss? That's a line for scoring right there that as a leader, you can draw in the sand and commit to and say, hey guys, come hell or high water, on every single call, we're just gonna say this sentence because it helps us know we're getting pain points. And so pair a small decision to raise the standard like that, mixed with great discovery questions, that is a yellow to a green and pinpoint the pain.
Perfect. What about step 2, qualify the lead? Where do we have a yellow versus a green score?
A yellow versus a green here, this one is where there's a little bit more nuance depending on if you have a one bridge or a multiple bridge sales process, but really it comes down to a couple things. A yellow could be this, let's say we asked great discovery questions and we picked up on a lot of cues that tell us whether someone's qualified or not, and we think that they're qualified. We're pretty sure they fit our ICP, the pain points were aligned. They're large enough, they referenced finances in a way that might indicate they can buy. But similar to pinpointing the pain, confirming and confirmation and being on with someone who can actually make the buying decision. So if you're going B, like a yellow could be, we're pretty sure they're qualified. And like, I have a great feeling about this one. That might be something a sales rep would say, or like, this could be really good. Green is, no, we know for a fact this buyer has the budget. We're talking to the decision maker and they have the pain points that we can solve, and we've confirmed that with them. And so sometimes through organic discovery, you can confirm it. Like you can say without a doubt, but the difference is a yellow is we're pretty sure, and a green is we can say it without a doubt. And in a B2B situation, a yellow could be, we know for a fact this organization is qualified, they have the right pain points, we have product, problem, solution, fit, but we're not on the phone with the decision maker, and that can be a yellow. And so sometimes you're gonna sell through a champion and they might run it to decision maker, and you have to live with that yellow until you get it done. But that is the clarity that you need. And so you wanna be thinking, what could we do to turn this a green, or what could we set our line and our bar, our standard for green scoring? So those are some ways to think through it as a sales leader.
Yeah. So step 3 then, solution and success. This is where buyers start, or the seller rather, starts talking about their product, their service, all of the things. What does it look like to have a yellow versus a green? And there's some nuances here that are really fun.
Yeah, this is one that I think a lot of sales leaders or rep, if you're listening to this, will notice that maybe you haven't done things exactly right. And that's because a yellow would be like a flawless execution of a demo or a presentation or what a company might call a pitch. You're walking through your product, your solution, and you're saying, here's what we've got. That could be a yellow. But the nuances when we think of the BridgeSelling Framework, step 3 is solution and success. And we can't even successfully talk about success and position our solution as that success until we know the right pain points. So if you're lacking in step 1, chances are you're hitting a lot of yellows in step 3, which would be you're talking about solutions, but they're not tied to specific, unique buyer pain points. So that's something we're always listening for with yellows. Are you info dumping, and are you giving people a lot of good information? Great, that's it. That might be a yellow. But are you doing it in a way where as you're going through 1 or 2 or 3 unique features of what you're selling, you're not only going through the features, but you're tying it to a pain point you discovered earlier and talking about how it will lead to a success? That's the gold standard. So a charismatic demo is a yellow. A charismatic demo tied to unique buyer pain points that you learned on a previous call or on the call you're on now, that's a green.
Okay, step 4, question and answer. Yellow versus green.
This one is pretty clean cut. The way we like to look at it is with a yellow, this could be, the buyer chimed in and asked a couple questions and the sales rep answered them. That's a yellow. The green would be the buyer chimed in with a few questions, the sales rep answered them, and then before advancing to next steps or closing the deal, the seller actually paused to say, hey, what other questions do you have for me? Do you have any other questions for me? And asking those questions to actually invite additional Q&A and what some would call objections or competitor comparisons, all of those things. A yellow would be the rep didn't ask that question, and a green would be the rep actually invited additional Q&A, confirmed there were no other questions, and then advanced. That's the difference between a yellow and a green. Where you'll hit a lot of yellows is a rep is nervous to get asked a specific question. They don't want to get asked about a specific competitor, or they're nervous to have to overcome an objection of some kind. And so they just don't invite that. But you want a sales team and you want sales execution that is not afraid of inviting those questions, because maybe you're going to invite some questions once you start installing this framework, and you're going to start to get hit with new questions, and you're going to have to hit them face on and come up with great answers for them, right? And that's just the process of running an exceptional sales conversation, is you can't be afraid of it. So yellow would be forgetting to confirm and make sure there are no other questions before going on with the conversation.
Yeah, perfect. And now step 5, 3 next steps, yellow versus green.
This is super fun. A yellow, and I will say, if you are listening to this and you're thinking through, how are you formulating your bridge score? And I will, as the creator of this framework and the one who's done it for a living for a long time, I will raise my hand and say, the reason that sometimes I score yellow in step 5 isn't because I can't execute it, but it's because I run out of time. And if you're really good at step 3 and 4, you will have an amazing conversation and you might run up on a hard stop. And so a red would be like you can't outline next steps, you skip it, you forget it, and the call ends abruptly. A red is just pure skipping. You've already outlined that in the book. But a yellow would be ending with some next steps that are vague and they're generic, or they're built on maybe the rep's idea of when they want to follow up. So a rep might say, hey, this has been a great conversation. I'll check in with you next week. Or I'm gonna send you this proposal and I'll follow up with you next week. That's a bit of a next step plan, but it's yellow for a few reasons. And that's because it's not reverse engineered around the buyer's timeline. So the gold standard is learning from the buyer. When are you hoping to make a decision on this? Or when are you hoping to pull the trigger on the purchase we're talking about or the decision we're talking about? Once you get the clarity on the timing of that, the sales rep's job is to reverse engineer the 3-step plan based on that. We want to serve the buyer. We want to build the timeline around them. If they give you a timeline that may be, you actually might propose an alternative timeline, that's absolutely okay, but we want to reverse it around the timeline of the buyer. And that's the difference between a yellow would just be vague, generic next steps that aren't built around the buyer's timeline. Green gold standard would be a 3-step plan reverse engineered on the buyer's timeline.
Finally, step 6, close or schedule. Yellow versus green score.
Yellow is you have some sort of follow-up conversation scheduled. It's on the calendar. You have an agreed upon next conversation, and a green is a closed deal. So if you're in a multi-stage sales process, a green for you in step 6 could be you have completed your stage in the sales process. So you've passed along the lead. If you're an SDR, maybe pass them on to an account executive, or you have completed that. But generally, a yellow is going to be you have a scheduled next conversation within your stage, and green is you've either sent the invoice, you've sent the contract, you've got money in the bank as much as you can on that call, and that's a green.
Yeah. Is there ever a scenario where a red score is actually a good score?
Yeah, great question. It is, because let's say, for example, you have a red in step 2, you're talking to someone who's not qualified, but then you have a green and you've closed the deal. I want sales leaders or salespeople to think through what are all the nightmare client situations you've had, right? If you were to go back and score that conversation across the BridgeScore, you're probably gonna learn they were not qualified in the first place, either because of all sorts of reasons. And that is important, where you do want your sellers to know, hey, if we're getting red and same with even steps 1 and 3, if we were never able to establish the true pain point and we were never able to really position our product as a real solution and success to it, if there's any yellows or reds earlier on, you don't want greens at the end, because that means you're inviting some sort of disruptive client situation. And so I would say the reds aren't always a bad thing. Reds with a qualified lead are not great, but if the rep's doing their best and they're just not able to get to a yellow or a green and things are stuck in a situation that's not ideal, that just means you keep working towards it. But a red in step 2 means you need to end right there.
For the leader who's listening to this and they're thinking, Jonny, this sounds like a lot of work. What encouragement or advice would you give them about the payoff of taking the time to do the work, determine what your BridgeScore criteria or your scoring rubric is, and to begin scoring calls the right way?
I would say, 1, it is a lot of work. And so you're not wrong, it is a lot of work. But what's the alternative? Do you want to continue with having broken sales calls? Do you want to continue investing in marketing and investing in payroll for your team and maybe trying to grow your team and just knowing that under the hood there's always something wrong? What's the alternative? And so if you do put in the work, you might need to go hunker down for a week or 2. I mean, that is exactly what we'll do, or what we'll tell sales leaders to do when we're starting this, is you got to get some scores and you've got to go do that in the right way. And it gives you an alternative look under the hood that you never would have had otherwise. There's data that says sales leaders admit to listening to less than 1% of the calls in their organization. And a lot of that is because we have tools that give us all these insights and pipeline that tracks data, so we don't feel like we need to go listen in on calls. And I would say if you're feeling like you don't want to do it, it feels like a lot of work, it totally is, but it's going to give you these insights you never had before. And then finally, when you do your rollout of the bridge and you have a custom bridge framework and you have your own magic pivots and your own bridge score, it gives you so much credibility to say, I listened to X amount of calls, and here's what I've discovered, and you won't regret it. I promise you. You're not going to regret doing that hard work.
Yeah. For the sales leader who's listening to this and going, yeah, but why don't I just throw it into AI? Put the call transcripts into AI and get the feedback that way.
Well, I think of a couple stories here, and I love AI. I think it's great. Like, this is my typical disclaimer on like hey, we love AI. We are not like AI haters here, and we have an AI tool. We have a tool internally. It's built around the framework. It can be customized for each bridge-selling framework. And so we have a tool we use ourselves for scoring calls. But when you do the initial scoring and the initial assessment of how your team is doing it, we will always start manual, and we will always go in and listen with our own ears, because if you just throw it into AI, you end up with a few things. One, we know that depending on what you're using, you could get some hallucinations. It could pull from another framework. It could do something that isn't quite accurate with the framework and the bridge selling methodology, which creates a lot of confusion. It gives you bad info. Also, the scoring can be a little bit off, and the lines that you're drawing on scoring can really only be determined by listening with your own ears and knowing when a rep does this, good things happen, and a rep forgets this, we're stuck in yellows and reds. You need to wait to use AI until you can confidently be the boss of it. And being the boss of the AI is telling them, hey, here are the lines we're drawing in it from scoring. The best way to do it is to listen with your own ears. You're also gonna pick up on a lot of the magic pivots that you wanna coach into your team, and the credibility you get just by saying you've done the work and you've listened to it. I think of a little antidote for this, which is a couple, even in the process of this book, I had reached out to a lot of people and asked them for advice on things and said, hey, what is your thought on the title? Or what is your thought on how we roll this out? Or what is your thought on this and that? And any time in life that you reach out to someone you trust for help, you're asking them that because they're a person with unique wisdom and perspective. And that's how you want to be positioned as a leader. I think there's a funny story when reaching out to people, asking questions about this book. Someone told me, hey, this is a great question for perplexity. And I had to chuckle because I'm like, of course it is. Like, we can always do anything with AI, but it's just like, I'm asking you because I know you have different perspectives. And so you want to be positioned as, you don't want to sit down with your team and say, hey, I threw a bunch of your transcripts into Perplexity or Claude or ChatGPT or insert whatever tool, and here's what I got. Your team is going to be a little bit, it's just different. The human dignity of saying, I sat down and I went through all these calls to try to help you is so much different than saying, I let AI score you. Yeah. It's different.
Okay, all really good stuff. So let's head into chapter 4, where we're gonna talk about how to customize each step of the bridge for your company.
All right, this will be a fun one. Let's do it.
Let's do it.